Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Nun 2, starring Taissa Farmiga, Jonas Bloke, Storm Reed, Anna Popplewell, and Bonnie Aarons, directed by Michael Chavez. Welcome back to Conjuring, folks, and I'm going to be honest, I remember seeing that first Nun in theaters and taking notes for that show, and remember not liking it as much, but we'll see if this is any better or worse. But let's get into the movie. The only thing I'll compliment is the New Line Cinema logo, as it was originally for a original for a Conjuring film, as they used the 1990s to 2000s logo, and I did like that. Maybe that spoils how I feel about the movie that's what the show is for. We open the movie in Tarascon, France, and the year is 1956, as we follow Jacques to a church where he works at and gets the wine and the priest makes people drink the blood of Christ. And this doesn't sound like a good thing, but I'm reminded of the very first episode of Family Guy where Peter drinks the blood of Christ and says, "Whoa, is that really the blood of Christ?" And how he must have been wasted 24 hours a day, which is hilarious to me, but I can't help but think of that clip from Family Guy. And after church services is over, Jacques plays football with the demon, and it eventually breaks the wine, and I can't help but laugh endlessly at the endless amount of suspense scenes, as they don't make me scared, but more makes me laugh. And that is never a good thing for a horror film. And the demonic nun, returned by Bonnie Aarons, burns the priest and scares the shit out of Jacques, which is hilarious to me, while the cinematography is making me think of Aliens vs. Predator Requiem. And that's not a good thing, as half of this fucking movie is dark as hell. We move on to Sister Irene, returned by Taissa Farmiga, putting wood on the muddy road, and they get back to the church, and she talks with Sister Deborah, played by Storm Reed, whom I reviewed earlier this year in Missing, as she doesn't confess while she's going to give the head of the church a heart attack with her smoking cigarettes. And these characters I don't care for, and this is not about the fucking characters. It's about the endless scares that doesn't scare me as much as that makes me laugh. And this script is banal to me, as I don't know what the fuck I was watching at this point. Like, for example, a few girls pick up some cockroaches and put it in Madame Lauren's room as a prank, and I wanted to scare the living hell out of them, as they were getting on my last fucking nerves. Maurice, returned by Jonas Bloke, and as well as the three girls who bully around Sophie, help Sophie out, who's the daughter of Kate, who's played by an actress named Anna Popplewell, who I have seen in the first two Chronicles of Narnia films, who happens to be a teacher at this school, while a boy goes to Maurice's speech to deliver something to him, and he gets girls laughed at and bullied by the school girls, let's call them, for the rest of the show, because I never got their names, and I don't want to as the delivery boy sees Maurice acting weird, but the demon nun traps him and kills him, and as this is turning into the kind of movie I don't want to watch right away, because they kill a child in this movie, as it's breaking all sorts of rules. While Irene has a dream of Maurice as a demonic presence, and that made me laugh as she wakes up and bleeds from the nose, and she gets a visitor by a priest and asks her to go after the demon nun. And to be honest, I'm already hating on this movie right off the bat, as this isn't scary. It's way too hilarious. And this is much worse than the first Nun film, to preview my thoughts, in my opinion. Irene gets accompanied by Deborah without the church's approval, because she says she wants to believe in miracles, and this is a terrible reason while joining the church you have to believe in miracles. Maurice fixes Kate's cupboard, as it was stuck at first, and they were reading a play, and the schoolgirls were bullying a girl was getting into character, and next thing you know, the schoolgirls make her go inside the forbidden room, where they see a goat with a red eye, and play some stupid game where they say the devil looks at you if you look right back at it, and the school girls run out behind Sophie and trap her in the room, and Maurice comes to her rescue. And if I were Maurice, I would scare the living hell out of the schoolgirls with the demon that possessed Maurice in the last movie. One way they can't be afraid, but this is a terrible scene from the get-go. I'm not even gonna lie. Irene and Deborah get to Tarascon, France, and they get to the church there, and Irene learns there was a witness named Jacques, and his mother doesn't want Jacques to talk about the events from the opening scene as we flash back to the end of The Nun 1, where Maurice and Irene talk about how he saved her life, and Irene gives Maurice some tomato seed, and she remembers how he got possessed by the nun at the end of The Nun 1, which is not the best idea unless you haven't watched The Nun 1 recently like I did. Sophie spies on Maurice and Kate talking briefly to each other, and she sees something is wrong with Maurice, and she goes with her mother in the opposite direction of where her mother went, as Kate goes upstairs while Sophie follows, and she sees the nun in the hallway turning into crows and bumps into the nun until Kate opens the door and she runs back downstairs, as we learn Kate was looking for her. And I didn't care at this point for the movie, as I was already done with the series. While getting a hotel room, Irene talks with Jacques while he was playing football, and why didn't he stop the game, as that was bothering me during the scene from the get-go. And he goes on playing the game until Irene loses him and bumps into the magazines, where eventually they flip and turn into an image of the nun, and it scares the hell out of her to the point it knocks her out. And again, I was laughing while this was in the trailer, and it didn't scare me. And unfortunately, it doesn't scare me now, as it didn't then either. It just makes me laugh my ass off. And Irene sees an image of the nun using fire, and I don't know what the fuck it was all about. And I don't really care while I had an hour until the movie was over. And it's 20 minutes too long, as it needed some editing. Madame Laurent finds Maurice near the Forbidden Room, and she goes in there and sees her dead son Cedric attacking her along with the nun and kills her. And what a terrible, terrible scene. Irene gets a doctor to wake her up for the morning and learns the demon nun is more powerful than ever, and then is going to kill Maurice, while Jacques gives Deborah a thing of the church, while Irene is knocked out and Kate finds Madame Laurent's dead in body in the Forbidden Room. And at this point in the movie, I was checked out of it, and there's 55 more minutes to go. Fuck. Maurice finds Sophie for Kate and sees her in a hidden spot, and says there's something not right with the school, something that wasn't meant to be in the school. And he comes up and talks with Sophie and gets her down to the school, while Irene and Deborah go to a library in France and learns about St. Lucy, and she wants to take Maurice's eyes, as it's a demon rejected by God, as demons are infinite, and to send the demon back to hell. And a monk named Jean-Paul Radin has an area that the public school took over many years later, as Maurice takes a Portuguese meal and brings Sophie and Kate to have dinner and dance with her, while Irene said to Deborah she lied to her about how much she didn't remember her mother when she did, and how she was taken away by doctors because her father didn't believe any of the shit she was saying. And this is all bullshit for bullshit's sakes. Irene and Deborah head to the school, and Maurice, Kate, and Sophie sees the demon nun, and when they arrive, they bump into each other, and Irene says to Maurice it's in him, and Kate and Sophie run with Irene and Deborah after they try to stop Maurice in this most horrible way possible, while Deborah knocks Maurice down while Irene was trying to stop the demon nun, which has got to be the stupidest scene. And what the fuck was that all about? It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Sophie comes up with an idea that the goat was a demon, while Irene gets an idea to make Deborah point the flashlight at the red dot as they find it, and it leads to something underground, which happens to be something that can catch the demon nun on fire. While Maurice is tied up and eventually escapes, which frustrates the hell out of me, the schoolgirls hear some noises coming from upstairs, and Deborah hears it as well, and they find a black goat that also looks like a man, which reminded me of the first Annabelle film with the demon you could barely see, and that's tiresome after a while. Deborah hides the other girls, and they look in Madame Laurent's room and see something evil, like including cockroaches, and see Madame Laurent, and she grabs one of the schoolgirls, and they run out of. And Deborah goes outside with Irene, Kate, and Sophie. See Maurice attacking, and Sophie conveniently runs out of the room, and he goes after her, and he does find her while Irene looks for her, and the thing that burns the demon nun turns on, and it burns the tower with the bell down, and Sophie is almost killed while hanging on the ledge of a piece of wood, along with Maurice, who does fall down to the ground while Irene looks for her and finds her and Maurice as she stops the demon nun, but she wakes up and burns the product, and the demon nun rises from Maurice's body and awakens, and Kate finds the other girls and sees the goat and closes the door on it while it tries to get in as it pokes a hole in one of the schoolgirls. And the demon nun gets Deborah tied up and tries to capture Sophie and almost burns Irene, but not completely, and Irene remembers her mother, and the demon nun drops her, and Deborah says that was a miracle, and Maurice almost kills Sophie, but as they pray and they have to break the wine boxes to kill the demon nun, as she burns in hell, and they bring Maurice back, and I was just frustrated by this climax, I was already checked out of this movie at this point in time. Irene and Maurice walk outside and sees his tomatoes are growing as Sophie and Kate enter while he looks at his tomatoes and says he feels bad, and they walk out as a family, and this song playing in the back scene made the movie sound even more dreadful, and credits roll to a mid-credit scene where Ed and Lorraine Warren, returned by Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga respectively, get a call to help out Maurice, and the rest of the credits rolled, and I just didn't want another sequel to this piece of shit movie. And the climax just frustrated the living hell out of me. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 1.0 out of 10. This is the worst movie in the Conjuring franchise, and much worse than the first Nun film, and they say this is the best. Give me a fucking break. As this didn't scare me, it made me laugh more than it scared me, and the cinematography is as bad as Aliens vs. Predator Requiem, as half of this fucking movie was dark, as it was hard to see some of the shit. It left me frustrated when I got to the climax, as it drove me crazy at times. I just don't care for this movie at the end of the day, as this was completely too silly, and I checked out around 50 minutes into the movie, as it's 20 minutes too long, and some of this needed to be cut out of the movie. This is the worst movie ever made, and I wish I never saw it, along with the Child's Play remake and Dark Phoenix, and so many other movies I gave this rating to, as this is the worst movie of the year, as this is a strong non-recommendation for this piece of shit movie. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and until we get another fucking Conjuring film, it's all over.